Welcome to tonight's special episode of The Naked Apple and the very first episode of our Slices of History.
All the slices. One slice.
Well, a slice of history.
More of
Small
sliver.
edible, mostly edible slice of the Big Apple of history.
We have at least 2 hours of research going into this and 5 hours of prep.
At least 2 hours of research, meaning I spent like 2 whole days looking at stuff, at least. And that's after having already known a little bit about the story beforehand. So
we want to try to get it right.
This is going to be fun. Anyway, we are your hosts. I am Mike Anderson.
I am Trevor Christensen.
And tonight we're going to be covering a rather fun moment in history from our good friends in Tennessee. This is the Battle of Athens.
Ah, yes, Athens. The Athenians weren't really great friends with the the other Greeks, and
that's
different
Athens. Different Athens. This is Athens, Tennessee. This is, like I said, our friends in Tennessee.
Tennessee wasn't one of the provinces of Greece.
No. It's one of the states of America. The used to be United.
Oh! You mean McMinn County? Athens.
Yes.
Why didn't you just say so?
McMinn County, place? Athens, Tennessee.
That was right in my glasses.
Finally, in the middle of his forehead.
It's when I say right in my glasses, it's not exactly my forehead, but you know.
Well, your eyes are high. Anyway,
but I haven't done anything.
It's not what the bloodshot says. Anyway, so I want to begin our story tonight with a quote from a sitting judge, and I love this quote. And this quote is, "The Second Amendment is a doomsday provision, one designed for those exceptionally rare circumstances where all other rights have failed, where the government refuses to stand for re-election and silences those who protest, where courts have lost the courage to oppose or can find no one to enforce their decrees. However improbable these contingencies may seem today, facing them unprepared is a mistake a free people get to make only once." Foreshadow. And that was Judge Alex Kaczynski in his dissent to the Ninth Circuit's denial of review in the Silvera versus Lockyer case. And as Trevor was whispering over there, it is very much foreshadowing because the story that we're going to cover tonight has a lot of political intrigue and insurrection that I actually find... refreshing isn't the right word, but it's very interesting to say the least.
The resolution was refreshing, maybe.
Yes, exactly.
The
resolution was refreshing. There you go. Yeah. So, for those of you that live in a big city or suburb, or have never lived without a cell phone readily accessible, I'm looking at most of the millennials out there. It's going to be hard to imagine the history we're going to be painting for you tonight. So McMinn County, Tennessee in the early 1940s was anything but modern. The people of the county worked their fields, went to church, read their newspaper, spent time with their neighbor talking about their land, God, family, and politics. Can you remember the last time you actually sat down and had a conversation with somebody about any of those things?
Yes.
Like in person?
Yeah.
Oh, well, you don't count because we do it every week.
Oh. Oh.
No, most other people don't have those conversations in person anymore. It's all in your little digital gizmos and things.
Yay.
But the people of McMinn didn't have that luxury. Most of them didn't even have electricity yet. And the nearest big cities, which were some 50 plus miles away, hadn't even begun their expansions into modern metropolis centers. So life was slow, and that was the way that most people liked it.
So you're saying people weren't exactly walking in Memphis quite yet?
No, not quite yet. I mean, Memphis was by far and away much bigger, and in fact, we're about to go there because to give some background to the setting of these tensions and events that are coming up, we got to go back and zoom out a little bit.
Marty, we must go back.
We must go back. Back to the future.
Past.
Back to the past.
The past future. Carry on.
Anyway. So to start this off, we need to go back and talk about a very specific man. His name was Edward Hull Boss Crump. He was a Tennessee Democrat born in Mississippi in 1874. He became a prominent politician and began to build a political empire starting in the early 1900s. Starting out as a delegate for the Tennessee Democratic State Convention in 1902 and 1904, Boss Crump was named to the Municipal Board of Public Works in 1905, and then was elected as the Commissioner of Fire and Police in 1907. One of 3 commissioners responsible for governing the entire city of Memphis. In 1910, he ran and was elected to the office of mayor, where he began to build a political machine that would eventually give him influence over his whole state and even influence all the way into Washington, D.C.
What?
Yeah, right? So, and when we're talking about a political machine here, this isn't just like he has a group of politicians around him that they all vote the same way and do the same things.
Right. He's got some printing press in the back that's just pumping out.
Right.
Oh, not an actual machine.
Not an actual machine. No.
Oh.
No. So when we're talking about a political machine, what Crump did during this time was, to say the least, questionably ethical. And by that, I mean entirely unethical.
Oh.
Yeah, right. So what he ended up doing was basically, I don't want to use the term buying votes, but that's pretty much what it was. He was pandering to specific groups to win their vote so that he could essentially control whatever he wanted. So he wasn't just getting them to vote for him. He was going out and telling them they needed to vote for certain people, essentially.
Oh.
And they would do certain things for these different groups so that the groups would continue to vote for them, but then they would turn around and do all kinds of other stuff on the side that was completely corrupt.
It's a good thing this was fixed in the past, so nothing like that happens today.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
good thing.
Okay. Wishful thinking. So Crump, while he was only mayor from 1910 to 1915, because he was ousted by the state government for failing to enforce prohibition laws, which, I mean, you can go back and forth about whether or not prohibition laws should have existed in the first place and all that stuff. But the fact of the matter was that prohibition was a thing at the time, and it was a thing that was put out by the states, and the mayors, some of them just refused to enforce it at all. And so during this time, some of the states, especially obviously Tennessee, put forth what they called the ouster laws, which was a set of rulings that were specifically meant to remove sitting mayors and officials that were refusing to enforce these prohibition laws. And the one in Tennessee was actually designed with Boss Crump in mind.
Oh, that's nice.
Because Crump was going out and doing a lot of things that the state of Tennessee really didn't like. He was building this machine. He was participating in all kinds of corruption. And he was doing just all kinds of things that the people of Tennessee didn't like.
He is the reason why we don't have nice things.
Exactly. He is the reason we don't have nice things.
You know that one guy at the company that makes you have to sit through that safety meeting? He's that guy.
Every week. At least once a week. And he was. So he built this machine. He started doing all these things. So the other elected officials in Tennessee go, we got to get this guy out because he's not playing by the rules. He's doing all these things his own way, whatever, yada, yada. So they put forth the ouster laws. Actually, they weren't laws. I can't remember exactly what they were called. Anyway, they put forward these things to remove Crump from power. But it doesn't really work because he'd already established the beginnings of his machine. So even though he was ousted in 1915, he effectively handpicked the officials for Shelby County, which was Memphis, Tennessee, and the surrounding area, and eventually all of Tennessee until about 1954 when he passed away. So when he left office in 1915, he had installed a official in the seat of the mayor that he thought would be a puppet, essentially, that he could, just pull around wherever he wanted.
He got ousted, so he decided to become a puppeteer.
Right, exactly. So he stepped back and became the man behind the curtain. And he was gravely disappointed in the first 2 or 3 people that ended up taking the mayor seat, that he ended up giving the mayor seat, I should say.
Thought he had a wooden puppet, but turns out they were real boys after all.
and in fact, it took him several tries and even a failed attempt at abolishing the position of mayor entirely before he found someone to his liking for the position. And during this time, he was continuing the more widespread work of establishing his political influence across the state. So in 1916, he ran for and was elected as the county trustee, where he was able to reform voter registration and establish a technique that would expand his influence for the next 30 years.
Yay.
So he goes from being mayor and building this government machine to put whoever he wants in these different offices. And then he goes on into the county as a county trustee, where he's able to reform voter registration. So essentially he got to pick and choose who was allowed to vote in the county in Shelby.
Yeah, I don't like you because you don't like me, so you don't vote.
And during his time as mayor, he was, like I said, he was buying these different groups, and some of the different groups that he ended up buying was actually the firemen and police force in Shelby County.
How would someone do something like that?
Well, he did it by, and this is the funny thing, is when you start picking apart the things that he did, on the surface, they look like really good things. Because he went into office as mayor on the promise that he would improve the fire department and the police department, that he would bring them into the modern day, and that by the time that he left office, that they would all have, the new
shiny new engines,
trucks, and the new cars, and the new police cruisers, and all of these different things, that he would update their departments. And he did that. He came into office and he sat down and he went through all these things. He bolstered county funding. He even built them inspiring public buildings, is what everything I read called it, that were in their honor. And so then he gets ousted out of office, runs and becomes county trustee, and essentially he begins using the fire department and the police department to bring in voters to the polls to swing votes his way. So he takes police officers and firefighters off duty and has them go and drive their brand new nice vehicles that he had updated out to pick up voters and take them to register and take them to the polls and take them to these different places so that they could vote for the people that Crump wanted them to vote for.
What a nice guy.
And so in that first year, the year 1916, when he ran for county trustee, it is estimated that this machine that he built, this way that he had come up with to get more voters, produced 25,000 extra votes in his county.
Now to put this in perspective, in the United States today, for president of the United States, only about 25% of voting age people show up to vote. 25 to 30%. So in a county, 25,000 people, it's going to make a little bit of a difference.
Especially when we get to the stats later that talk about the percentage of people that left McMinn County during World War II. And so it's around, what was it, like 3,000 to 5,000 people. I can't remember the exact number right now. I've got it written down here somewhere. I'll find it later when we get to that stat. But it was about 10% of the entire county, McMinn.
Yep.
This is 25,000 extra votes. So
he got 90% of the county to show up and vote.
Yeah, exactly. You're talking he pulled like 90% of a county in to vote using this method. So from 1917 to 1923, so that's the following year, he became the county treasurer, which gave him the salary and access he needed to control things the way he really wanted to.
What kind of access, I wonder, being the treasurer of the county?
Right. So he has all of this new influence, all of this access to money and funding and the ability to direct funds and different things like that in this county. And so he then goes and establishes an insurance company.
Well, that's nice. People need insurance.
Oh, yeah, people need insurance. They need to be insured, especially if they're going to do government work. So he builds the Crump Insurance Company, and he ran it from his Memphis office in a bank there on the 6th floor, and required that anyone in government or wanting business with Memphis, Tennessee had to get insurance with his company. So they weren't just allowed to come in and work or come in and get a job. They had to be insured with the Crump Insurance Company.
Well, to be clear, he didn't require them per se.
No, that's true. He advised.
Being the treasurer and all, I mean, you might not get the things you need if you don't have insurance.
Right.
You probably want to get this insurance.
Right. So he goes on this, I mean, it's years long. He's just building power, building political sway. Using his influence, he accrued power and loyal group of voters consisting of old-time Democrats, various social and civic groups, and African Americans, to whom he promised paved roads and a new city park in their neighborhoods to secure their votes.
Where have I heard that before?
It's almost like they just play the same old tune all the time, isn't it?
Rommel.
Rommel. So he goes through all this and eventually decides, the state's not enough for me. And so he runs for Congress and he wins.
Of course.
Him and, of course, his senator, Kenneth McKellar.
Now, when you say his senator,
I mean his possessive, he owned Kenneth McKellar.
Oh,
so
he wasn't a real boy yet.
No, he wasn't a real boy. There were strings all over him. So he goes into Congress for one term and decides he doesn't really like it because he's not the head honcho there like he is in Tennessee.
No, he doesn't have the tenure.
Yeah, exactly. He's not the royalty that he likes being. So he decides to just install a puppet there too and moves himself back to Tennessee and sits in his lovely little castle in Memphis. And that's where we come back to the beginnings of our story, the Battle of Athens.
Whoa.
So as Boss Crump's machine expands across the state, it finds its way to McMinn County, Tennessee, in the guise of Paul Cantrell. Cantrell was the Democrat candidate for McMinn County Sheriff. and he tied his campaign for sheriff closely to that of Franklin D. Roosevelt. Franklin D. So, writing FDR's success and possibly committing a little fraud, allegedly swapping ballot boxes in what later became known as the vote grab in 1936, Cantrell secured the position of sheriff and wasted no time in establishing his own brand of heavy-handed corruption in the county. So 1936, we get this new Democratic sheriff in town, and things immediately go to pot.
Oh, it didn't turn into Mayberry?
Oh, no. No. No.
I miss Mayberry.
Wow. The country references.
Oh, I've
this
got more.
Is great.
It's going to be good.
You've got a little web page up over there, don't you?
I have the Battle of Athens document pulled up in front of my face.
Is that what you're reading?
And the U.S. Constitution, and if Hamilton is copyrighted.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Those are my tabs.
So, getting back to the story, following his election, Cantrell and his deputies, I've said that name like 3 different ways now. Cantrell, whatever.
Cantrell. Pronounce it how you wish.
Cantrell. Anyway, that's probably how it was pronounced, being from the South.
Cantrell.
So Cantrell and his deputies established themselves as barely more than thugs, exploiting loose Tennessee laws to amass wealth and power in the county and control the politics of the area. So him and his men, when he gets put in office, they are receiving a fee for every person that they manage to pass through their jail. So with that, what I'm referring to is they have to arrest the person for something, book them into the jail, and then release them.
Then release.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So
and then grab them again.
Right. The more human transactions that they make like this, the more they get paid. And that all that's required for them to get paid is to get a voucher signed by the sheriff and take it to the local county court. And then they get paid for that booking.
But there's no quotas.
No quotas. None. That's not a thing. So, you know, he has these deputies going out and doing this, and the corruption is just everywhere. Spreads all through the county. To the point where deputies are boarding buses that are passing through town. Like, not even like buses locally or people like going to the bar and then leaving in a bus.
Your Greyhound bus.
Yeah, literally. Your Greyhound bus that is just passing through town going somewhere else. They are boarding these buses and arresting passengers on the bus and charging them with drunkenness, even though,
well, I mean,
like, whether they're guilty or not.
Tennessee is a dry state, so.
Oh, yeah, of course it's a dry state. Not in McMinn County. But
whiskey.
It gets ridiculous because they're charging them, you know, with drunkenness. They're hauling them off to jail and fining them up to $16.50.
$16.50.
$16.50. So that would be the equivalent of about $300 today.
Oh, that's kind of bad.
Yeah, for doing nothing more than falling asleep on a bus. So
don't ride the bus that drives at night.
And they would arrest as many as 115 people in a weekend.
Oh.
So over the span of 10 years while Cantrell was sheriff at in Athens, they accrued around $300,000, which in today's money is somewhere between $4.2 and $5.6 million in nothing but fines.
In nothing but grabbing people off of a bus.
Yeah.
Fines.
Yeah, like completely just
some stand-up
frivolous arrests and fines $4.2 to $5.6 million.
Some stand-up officers of the law there.
So, and that's not the worst part, because while the fines were profitable, they required a certain amount of record keeping.
Those darn records.
And you know how tedious paperwork is.
Sign this, submit that.
Once you sign a paper, it goes in the system, and it's really easy for somebody to go back and find it. So there are far more lucrative and less dangerous ways to collect money when you're a corrupt cop, right?
Yeah, like maybe just not be a corrupt cop.
Well, but that doesn't make you money.
Oh.
And in this town, it'd probably get you shot.
By the corrupt cops.
Yeah, exactly. So what they start doing is shaking down and taking kickbacks from roadhouses that they allowed to openly operate. So, Trevor, can you tell me what a roadhouse is?
Well, there's a roadhouse just down the road.
Like Texas Roadhouse?
Texas Roadhouse.
Is that what you're...
It's the more successful version of the Tennessee Roadhouse.
Oh, more successful.
That's why you don't see Tennessee Roadhouse everywhere. You see Texas Roadhouse.
Yeah.
No,
so,
Roadhouse is where that's where you go to get a little moonshine and
yeah, so
maybe a woman or two and play some cards.
Right. So they were little inns and things like that had nightclubs and liquor in them, which at this time was extremely illegal
and extremely lucrative.
Very, very lucrative. So they aren't supposed to be operating in the state of Tennessee, but in McMinn County, the corrupt deputies and corrupt sheriff were just letting them run openly. And so they'd go into these roadhouses and they'd find, especially if they could find a cooperative owner of one of these, they would go in and the owner would point out his more influential patrons. So, the mayor is sitting over there. Don't mess with him. The county clerk is over there, and there's a man from Memphis over there in the nice bowler hat, and we call him boss. But don't mess with those guys. But everybody else in here is free game. So they would go in and they would get these lists of people that they couldn't mess with, and then they would shake down everybody else in the club for money.
We're considered the great honor.
Yeah, right. So during this time, it's prohibition in the whole country, basically. If I remember right, it was the whole country, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a federal thing.
But in McMinn County, prostitution, gambling, alcohol was all so common that throughout Tennessee, Athens was known for being wide open. And Control, the sheriff, was living like a king. So there's a book written by a man named Chris DeRose. The book is called The Fighting Bunch, The Battle of Athens and How World War II Veterans Won the Only Successful Armed Rebellion Since the Revolution.
Spoiler.
It's all in the title. But in his book, he details some things about Control that are kind of... So... The sheriff drew salaries of nearly $60,000 per year over his first 6 years. So that would have been worth well over $1 million in today's money.
So a little bit of cash.
So I don't know about you, but I don't know that I've ever met a sheriff that made that much money.
As being a sheriff, no.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And this was his actual salary. This wasn't his illegal gatherings.
Paid.
This was what he was paid every year by the county. And then to make matters worse, he gets appointed as the superintendent of the county workhouse for an additional salary of over $2,000 per year, bringing his total to, around $62,000 a year. Little over that, right? And I mean, it's about what there's it's not a bad living now. I'll take it. I'll take it. But there's a hitch right here. There's a little hook.
There's always a catch.
There's a little catch, a little snag on that, and it's that McMinn County did not have a workhouse. So I assume that would make its superintending pretty easy. So
you had to supervise something that
doesn't exist. Yeah, it's pretty simple to supervise something that doesn't exist, right? But
interesting.
Illegal casinos, speakeasies, and whorehouses paid thousands of dollars per month in protection money. Dozens of county employees were listed on the payrolls for the sole purpose of providing cover for a vast money laundering operation.
When the government doesn't get its money from taxes, someone else will.
Right. The corruption here, though, like, you're laying everything out like this, and you keep in mind, like, Boss Crump wasn't ever accused of anything like this egregious, but he's the one that helped these people get in power. They were accomplishing his goals.
He was an accomplice to everything, but was guilty of nothing.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. But anyway, so this is how Control's 10-year reign as the king of McMinn County began. So in subsequent elections, ballot boxes were collected from the precincts, and the results were counted in secret at McMinn County Jail in Athens, as opposed to out in the open by a third neutral party, the way they're supposed to be.
Wait, so the elections were fraudulent?
Yeah, pretty much all of them.
But I thought that never happens.
Oh, no, it happens all the time.
Oh.
And they obviously had, like, no fear of recourse, because they were straight up ejecting opposition poll watchers from the precinct houses and even arresting them at this time for being troublemakers. So
for reference, we're recording this on October 6, 2020.
Yes.
If you listen to this at all past today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, if it still exists, this is probably the most documented case of election frauds. Frauds.
Plural.
Multiple elections. Fraudulent. That we have in the United States, and almost nobody knows anything about it.
And this is, so the only, and this is the really sad thing about this story, is the only cases of election fraud that were actually, like, fully exposed and dealt with because of this event are the elections in McMinn County. For the course of 46 years, Boss Crump was setting up and stealing elections across the country.
Right.
And of all of his schemes, of all the things that he did, this is the only portion of his machine and his corruption that was ever stopped.
Yep. Wouldn't be surprised if they're still going on today.
Probably. So it just keeps going. So in 1940, George Woods, a plump and affable Etowah crony of Control, was elected to state legislature. So you have George Woods, who's working for the sheriff of McMinn County, Control, who's working for Crump at this point. And Woods is elected to the state legislature. So he promptly introduces an act to redistrict McMinn County.
Well, why would someone want to do that?
Well, let me tell you, Trevor.
Oh, thank you.
It's because it reduced the number of voting precincts from 23 to 12.
Oh, so it made it easier to actually count everything.
Yeah, so they just combined a bunch of, 8 or 9 states into 5. Oh, wait. No, that's what the Democrats are trying to do now. Damn it. It just took 23 voting precincts and turned them into 12, cutting down the number of justices of the peace from 14 to 7.
Oh.
So, and then it gets better. So of these 7 that are remaining, 4 of them were openly Contral men.
Oh, so just the majority.
Yeah. So what they did is they combined all of these precincts and got rid of all of the judges that were Republican or opposed to Sheriff Contral in any way, except for like 3 of them.
You can't get rid of all of them. That'll be suspicious.
Yeah, that would be suspicious, right?
But if you get rid of most of them.
So they get rid of most of them. So then you have a 4-3 split for the entire state with 4 of them in the pocket of Contral and Crump.
Oh.
So there's that. So when Governor Prentice Cooper signed Wood's bill into law on February 15th, 1941, effective Republican opposition died in McMinn County.
Oh.
There was no longer any opposition to their machinations at all.
Well then.
So the McMinn County court, though, was still dominated by Republicans, and so they directed the county to purchase voting machines, thinking that a machine will stop voter fraud.
Can't stuff a box if there's no box to stuff.
Right? But that didn't really work because Contral countered by having Woods get a bill passed in Nashville abolishing the court and selling machines to save the county money.
Not just let's get rid of the judges. There's just no court.
So we no longer need you to serve the community anymore. So bye.
I'm not above the law. I am the law.
Right? You should have the soundboard tonight. We should have thought that through beforehand.
Yeah.
But it gets to the point where a common refrain among the townsfolk started becoming just wait till the boys come home. Because at this point, they're right in the middle of World War II.
War is raging across the world.
As World War II sets in, though, Contral himself steps down as the sheriff and replaces himself with one of his men, Pat Mansfield.
Patty.
And Contral decides to run for Tennessee Senate,
Naturally.
which he wins because
How?
Crump.
Oh, wait, we went through all that.
Yes,
already.
we've been through this many times. But it just gets so bad with these 2 sheriffs that the people they just can't stand it. So they start petitioning the Department of Justice for relief. Knowing that local and state officials wouldn't take any action against the machine, a hardware store owner wrote Attorney General Francis Biddle imploring, "The good people of this county are sacrificing for the cause of America's freedom, but have lost their freedom at home. Both parties have lost the freedom of the ballot box. A dictatorship has been set up. The county treasury is being raided at the expense of the taxpayers, and the good people of this county would like to sell their property and move away. Your department is our last line of defense. Please, for God's sake, come to the rescue of a helpless people." A minister also wrote to Biddle of a ruthless exploitation at the hands of unscrupulous men who sacrifice public liberties for the sake of private gain. Nothing has been considered too low if it will enable them to perpetuate themselves in office. Decent citizens feared to bring their wives to the polls and often felt it unwise to cast their own ballots. It is not possible for a letter to contain information concerning all the subversive and unscrupulous activities that have taken place in this county. So, there was a little bit of corruption.
Some people were upset.
There was Some people that were mildly
upset.
Mildly inconvenienced by some things. It's a mild inconvenience. It's mostly peaceful. Mostly peaceful, but
mostly
mildly
peaceful
inconvenient. So, the Department of Justice compiles a report observing that the alleged violations in McMinn County were the worst ever brought to the attention of the Department of Justice. Despite overwhelming evidence and continuing petitions, the feds took no action.
Oh. But there was evidence.
Well, yes, but they took no action.
But they have Joe Biden on record. I mean, they have...
Well, they took a little bit of action.
Oh, okay.
A little bit. But not for a while.
Oh.
So a separate ouster lawsuit against McMinn election commissioners was finally tried by the Assistant Attorney General, largely due to the fact that the U.S. Attorney and the 2 U.S. Senators who had recommended him were believed to be associated with the machine. But this case was held before a judge who was also rumored to be a part of the organization. So the judge dismissed most of the charges and fined the men 1 penny for the charges that stuck.
Oh. Well, I mean, adjusted for inflation, that's like 10 cents.
So, meanwhile, the machine just hummed right along. And under the new supervision of Mansfield, things for the county actually got worse. Worse. Yeah, they got worse. Yeah. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Basically. So the corruption escalates, the shakedowns worsen. It eventually gets to the point where the deputies and people in Sheriff Mansfield's crew were deputizing random criminals on the street to help them do things that were illegal.
Oh.
One such instance being near the end of September in 1944, a Navy Seabee was enjoying his first night of leave. He and another sailor went out for drinks and music. And DeRose describes the events that followed thusly. Ford asked to use the telephone in plain view. They told him they didn't have one. Ford got up to leave. His friend went with him. Deputy Minnis Wilburn thought they looked like easy marks. Servicemen always had money. He'd arrest them and pocket a nice fee. He deputized George Sperling and Clyde Davis, notorious criminals both, as officers of the law in order to assist him in making an arrest. They caught up with the sailors in the parking lot. Sperling clubbed Ford repeatedly over the head. Ford, stumbling, backed up, his hand raised in surrender. "Don't move or I'll blow you in two," said Sperling. Ford didn't move, so Sperling shot him in the chest from 10 feet away.
Oh.
Ford staggered, struggling to stand, trying to comprehend what was happening to him. Earl Ford fell to the ground, where he was left for 20 minutes. Ford was pronounced dead at Foree Hospital. Sheriff Mansfield defended the shooting to the newspaper. Wilburn undertook to subdue a bunch of disorderly sailors and others, and deputized Sperling and others on the scene to help him. Mansfield claimed that they had pulled Ford off of Sperling's back and that Ford had charged Sperling with a knife. Why hadn't anyone else seen the knife? Wilburn claimed the knife was found under Ford's body. He did not explain how a knife held out in front of a man could wind up behind and under him when he was shot.
So he shot himself in the back of the head 2 times, dragged his dead body to the to the tree and hung himself.
Sounds vaguely familiar. Was that an Epstein case? W.O. Swindler, a cattleman from South Carolina, was traveling through town with his son and didn't know anyone involved. They were the first to come to Ford's aid. Neither saw any weapons anywhere near the body. A doctor who came outside the halfway court and attempted to save Ford's life saw no weapon. In fact, Ford was wearing a sailor's uniform with no pockets and had nowhere to conceal a knife.
So all that damning evidence.
Right.
And nothing.
So it just gets worse and worse. I understand.
But this is a hopeful story.
It is eventually, but you have to travel through the darkness to see the dawn, my friend. Right? So, McMinn County deputies often walked into bars and announced that every patron was under arrest for public intoxication. I didn't want to be drunk in public. I wanted to be drunk in the bar. They pulled me into public.
Well, now, son, you're just so drunk you don't know where you're walking. See?
Oh, and as DeRose notes, were the siren bandits, policemen who targeted innocent motorists and tourists. These deputies pulled people over and outright robbed them. And we're not talking about like we've seen in modern day where somebody will slap stickers on their car and go throw a siren light and stuff on. No, this was actual officers.
Right.
In the sheriff's department, pulling people over, taking all of their things.
Right. So they pulled them over and they smell alcohol on them and
no. They just pulled them over and robbed them like
and
average
decide they need
thugs.
to search the car and cite civil asset forfeiture to take all the money they have. Oh wait, no.
I don't think they even. If you want to put it in modern legalese, yes, that's exactly what they did.
Modern legalese.
But back then, there weren't even loopholes for them to do it legally. They just robbed people.
Because I can.
Yeah, pretty much. So, these deputies, they're pulling people over, robbing them, and all the while, the bootleggers, casino operators, and pimps were raking in piles of money, protected by the same officers. And McMinn County Jail in downtown Athens was a fortress. And it was so bad that like average civilians wouldn't even walk in front of it.
Oh, but I'm sure the inside was really nice because, they're collecting all these fees and fines and getting lots of money for the state to upgrade their buildings.
Well, DeRose actually described.
So we're gonna
a little bit of this.
Read about the gold toilet then.
He says people would walk a block out of their way to avoid walking past, lest they be arrested by a lazy deputy.
Uh-huh.
So the one fat donut eating guy that sits on the chair in front of the jail. He would chase people down if they tripped in front of the jail and things and arrest them. So literally, that's the next thing he says is the sidewalk was cracked in front of the jail and anyone who tripped was certain to see the inside on a charge of public drunkenness. So they literally would have like this deputy sitting in front of the jail waiting for somebody to trip so he could arrest them for being drunk.
I just tripped.
No.
Yeah, you tripped because you're drunk.
So he continues on. Prisoners remembered its sickening stench, the air thick with flies, sleeping on uncovered mattresses, black with dirt, filthy blankets, huge cobwebs, and peeling paint.
But they were getting lots of money.
Yeah, for themselves.
Oh.
So the kitchen was a dirty, nauseating disgrace. Oh. The money not spent on the housing and feeding of prisoners went straight into the sheriff's pocket. So that's why.
Oh.
Basically.
So it was terrible.
Yeah.
Oh.
So and it was actually like part of this came out when Control betrayed a member of his own little group, and the man went to court and aired some of his dirty laundry. So in retaliation, the man's father was arrested, robbed, and an attempt was made on his brother-in-law's life, shot in broad daylight by a deputy.
Oh, splendid.
So that's the kind of
that's real nice.
That's the kind of place we're talking about here.
Some stand-up people.
And this is particularly distressing when you understand the kind of people that were in McMinn County.
Okay. So they're a unique bunch.
Really.
Compared to the rest of Tennessee.
Like, compared to the rest of the United States.
Oh.
Like, So during the Civil War, Tennessee's deep in the middle of Confederacy territory. Yeah.
Also, for reference, McMinn County is in the southwestern corner of Tennessee, if
Yes.
I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Or southeastern, sorry.
And
Southeastern corner.
McMinn County sides with the Union.
Oh.
So they're
So they're not the
anti-Confederacy.
They're not the Southern Democrats. They are
right.
Yeah.
So and in 1898, they declared war on Spain. McMinn County. I'm not talking about the U.S. I'm talking about McMinn County, Tennessee, declared war on Spain 2 weeks before Washington got around to it. They were just like, you know what? No, you're stopping. We're coming.
They started mobilizing 2 weeks before the U.S. in the Spanish-American War.
Right? So this begs the question, how? How did Control and Mansfield, how did they have such undisputed control over a county noted for its independent and cantankerous spirit? And this is where we get to the statistic that I talked about earlier. So the Second World War. As all of this is going down, as they're stealing the votes, as they're gaining more and more power, and especially as Mansfield comes into the sheriff's position and things start to get so much worse, World War II is going on. And 3,526 young men from Mansfield County are drafted and go to the war. They're gone. Which is about 10% of McMinn's population.
So when he brought in 35,000 votes,
25. It's 25,000
votes.
Mm-hmm.
He pretty much did get close to 90% of people to vote.
Yeah, he's pretty freaking close to 90%.
Which is impossible.
Well, different counties though. Memphis was in Shelby, which has quite a bit larger.
Valid.
But still, 25,000 votes is a egregious
lot.
Amount. So, but this explains why McMinn was so easily overrun and overtaken with this, is because they're missing most of their good fighting men. They're voting age young men.
Those willing
here
to fight.
And so those that are left behind are the older and perhaps some of the more timid citizens. And that probably contributed to Control's machine's growth by them remaining silent.
Doing nothing is doing something.
Silence is violence, my friend. Wait.
No,
No,
it's not.
it's not.
Violence is violence.
Violence is violence. But as we get to the good part of the story, it all soon changed as World War II came to an end in 1945.
Hooray!
Yay! So one of the veterans, a man by the name of Bill White, whose name will come up several more times during this story, recalled coming home from overseas with his mustering out pay in his pocket. He said, "There were several beer joints and honky-tonks around Athens. We were pretty wild. We started having trouble with the law enforcement at that time because they started making it a habit of picking up GIs and fining them heavily for most anything. They were kind of making a racket out of it. After long, hard years of service, most of us were hardcore veterans of World War II. We were used to drinking our liquor and our beer without being molested. When these things happened, the GIs got madder. The more GIs they arrested, the more they beat up, the madder we got."
That was a much better accent.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
Stick with that one.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
It's good. It's good.
It fits.
Yeah, it fits. So in 1946, as the election loomed, all of these veterans get together and determine that they had had enough. They decided to exercise one of the many rights that they had fought and many of them had died for. Determined to take the election, they established their own ticket. and they put forward Knox Henry to run against Contrell, who was returning to once again run for sheriff after his small stint in the Senate. And they adopted the slogan, "Your vote will be counted as cast." It's a small jab there to
little pokey poke,
little soft right hook to the fact that they were stealing the elections before. So they began a long campaign against the corruption and fraud that had plagued their county. As the campaign progressed, it became apparent to several of the GIs that things wouldn't go off without a hitch. So our friend we just talked about there, Bill White, he put out a call to his fellow veterans, to his fellow GIs, said, "Listen, do you think they're going to let you win this election? Those people been taking these elections for years with a bunch of armed thugs. If you never got the guts enough to stand up and fight fire with fire, you ain't gonna win." And about 60 men answered his call, organizing a militia to observe the voting process and keep Contrell and Mansfield from once again rigging the outcome as they armed themselves and prepared for what was to come. And that's how the Fighting Bunch was born. The Fighting Bunch is, obviously, it was the part of the title of the book that DeRose wrote, but the Fighting Bunch is obviously the name that the militia took on of these veterans that decided they were going to handle making sure that this election didn't go sideways like the last ones did.
Almost as if they took some sort of oath.
Yeah, right?
To protect and defend.
So, you know, as they're making these preparations, they're doing all this stuff in secrecy. They're not letting anybody know. So they get their ticket together, and they call it the ex-serviceman's cleanup ticket for McMinn County. And another author by the name of C. Stephen Byrum noted the GI ticket was superior to the machines by any rules of logic. Comprised of men young and old, Democratic and Republican, city and country, all veterans, all battle-tested, and all highly thought of. So the local Republican Party resolved to officially endorse the veterans' ticket instead of running its own candidates. Probably the best decision that any Republican group has ever made in the history of this country.
Right here, folks.
Right here. So,
oh, golly. That's a real humdinger.
So after seconding the motion in favor of the resolution, one party official delivered an excellent summation. "We are involved in a conflict with desperate enemies who have sought to subject us to tyranny and oppression. We feel a deep sense of obligation and now seek in measure to repay. Young men who have fought against oppression abroad will continue that fight for honesty and decency at home." And so their campaign actually took off. Yes. They tried. They tried to do it right.
The third party.
And this is by far and away the most successful. Technically, it's a third party run, even though they were endorsed by the Republicans. They came in as a third party. It was a mix of Democrats, Republicans, independents, all these different people in this county, and they get the Republican endorsement, but it's their ticket. Yes. It is their people.
It's the GI ticket, I think, is what they end up calling it.
Yeah, they end up calling it the GI ticket. So as the campaign continues and ads from both sides were seen and heard across radio and newspaper, calls of misconduct by the established Democrats were countered by trumpeting of historic accomplishments, arrests, and confessions of county deputies for transport of illegally imported alcohol.
So you have one side trying to blame the other of what they themselves are doing, and the other side pointing out what that side is actually doing.
Yeah, right. And all these allegations.
Where have I seen that before?
And this is what's really, really funny. So the county deputies thing was real. Like, they were caught. They had the liquor. They called it election whiskey. They admitted having it and transporting it. They outright confessed to everything. But then everything was denied and swept under the rug. And then they put out an ad countering with accusations that the GIs were stuffing ballot boxes.
You may think you have won with your superior logic and reason. But we're going to accuse you of something that we also do.
It just keeps getting worse and worse as the election comes up. So you have advertisements in the Post-Athenian 2 days before the election that read as follows. The first one is from the GIs, and it says, "These young men fought and won a war for good government. They know what it takes and what it means to have a clean government, and they are energetic enough, honest enough, and intelligent enough to give us good, clean government." Now, I want to point out that ad doesn't attack the other side at all. It is entirely, these are my...
Here's what we stand for.
Yeah. Like these are my positives. These are the things that you should vote for me for. And so then a few pages later, you get this ad from the Democratic Party. "Look at the facts. You will vote for the Democratic ticket. The campaign fight is as old as the hills. It is the story of the outs wanting back in."
I didn't know the Jedi hand wave worked. Via text.
Right.
You will vote.
You will vote for the Democratic ticket. You will vote. If you don't vote for me, you ain't black.
Wait.
I
don't see that in the thing
It's-
here, but that sounds so familiar.
That sounds so familiar. Anyway, so election day approaches, and veterans from across the state start volunteering to come help watch the polls to ensure that everything is above board.
Oh,
right?
Some third-party people to watch out.
Yeah, some people from around to come and watch the polls. And yeah, so Sheriff Mansfield announces, "It has come to my attention that certain elements intend to create a disturbance at and around the polls. In order to see that law and order is maintained, I will have several hundred deputies patrolling the county."
Several hundred.
He then hired these deputies from outside the county, and some of them from outside of the state, posting them armed in every single voting precinct.
I'll see your influx of volunteers from around the state and raise you people from out of the state that I will give firearms to.
I'll see your veterans from all over the place and raise you my criminals from everywhere. Mine get guns.
Careful.
So now we get to the really good part. You know what day it is now?
Election Day.
Election Day. August 1st, 1946. Election Day. It got off to a fiery start early on. So the morning broke to find voters lined up in the largest turnout in local history. Right?
So there's actually going to be as many people as votes counted this time.
Right. Actually going to be as many people. Exactly. Oh, maybe.
Well,
we'll see.
Yeah.
Right? And approximately 300 of Manfield's
You're going to need a bigger box.
special deputies guarding the polling stations. And it gets off really well right at 9:30 a.m.
All right, polls are open. Let's do this.
9:30, polls open. Walter Ellis, the GI rep legally stationed at the 1st Precinct Courthouse, is arrested and jailed for protesting irregularities. 9:30 in the morning.
Polls were open for probably a half hour, I'm guessing.
Yeah, right about half an hour. And they already have arrested one of the poll watchers
From the opposing
from
party.
the opposing party. So
That's not suspicious at all.
this starts out, and so the GIs gather at the office of their campaign manager, Jim Buttram, who had been tasked with collecting reports of election fraud.
Must have been fun for him.
Oh yeah, so
9:30.
they show up at his campaign or at his office, and he initially like refuses to answer the door. Like, they're sitting there pounding on the door, and it takes him a bit, and he finally answers the door, like,
Nope.
just absolutely, completely crestfallen, and they immediately know this is not going well. So he takes them into his office, and he shows them copies of 2 telegrams dated July 22nd. So what would that be, a week before? About
A week and a half-ish.
week and a half-ish before.
Yeah.
One of them is to Governor Jim McCord of Nashville.
Oh.
The other is to Attorney General Tom Clark in Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay. So they're going to get some
Right.
help
So
from the
so
state
they,
and
they
the
send these
federal government.
telegrams, both of them requesting aid to ensure a fair election, and
They
neither
came to the-
one of them was answered.
None of. Oh.
It
none
came
of
to
that.
nothing. Nothing
Okay.
happened.
Oh.
They were ignored.
Oh. They were probably busy.
Yeah, they had other elections to watch,
Yeah.
or rig, whatever. So it's at this point in the afternoon, Otto Kennedy, a political advisor for the veterans, arrives with news that armed guards had been placed at each precinct in preparation for the 4:00 p.m. poll closing. So on top of the sheriff's deputies that had already been placed across the county in all these precincts, there's now more additional armed guards at all these places.
No, they're just there to protect the box. They're not there to intimidate voters.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
So after this news, the group decides it was time for an armed mobilization, and they disperse to go get their weapons.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is bad news.
This
is
is
bad news. This is. I don't even know how to explain this one as far as how bad.
And remember,
this actually is.
this isn't a rash decision by the GIs.
No.
This is 10
This is-
years. This started before World War II started. So
Yeah.
they knew these guys beforehand.
And
And they're still there, and they're doing ish still. It's been
it's
10
getting progressively
years.
worse, and they're obviously trying to steal this election.
They
Obviously.
have petitioned government leaders from local
And-
to state to federal government leaders to get help and
Nothing.
silence.
Nothing.
So now they have to revert back to
And
their rights under the Constitution.
the real spark that sets off the powder keg actually happens while they're having this meeting, before they go and get their guns, but they don't hear about it until, or most of them don't hear about it till after. So around 3:00 p.m., an elderly black man by the name of Tom Gillespie enters the 11th precinct to cast his vote. Stationed at this precinct was a man named Windy Wise. He was a guard for Control. Windy denied Tom his right to vote and yelled racial slurs at him.
Oh, that's nice of them.
Yeah, when Tom persisted, trying to still get in and give his vote because he's a good voting man and it's his right to vote. And that's literally what he said was, it's my right and I'm exercising my right to vote. And Windy struck him with a pair of metal knuckles.
Oh.
And then as Tom dropped his ballot and tried to flee from the building, Windy shot him in the back.
Like the coward he is.
Yes. So the gunshots, of course, draw a crowd, and the 11th Precinct polling station is located in the Waterworks building. And it draws this big crowd, and a few minutes later, Sheriff Mansfield pulls up in his cop car and posts 4 guards at the Waterworks.
Oh, so
closes
he's-
the precinct to voting.
So he's there to straighten out the situation.
Yeah, of course. So he posts 4 guards, closes the precinct to voting, and arrests Gillespie. And hauls him off to jail.
Not the deputy. Oh.
No, hey, he arrests Gillespie and hauls him off to jail. So it gets even better.
Oh.
In the
Oh,
confusion
good.
following the shooting, Ed Vestal and Charles Scott, the 2 GI poll watchers, were arrested and held hostage inside the 11th Precinct Waterworks by Wise and another deputy named Carl Neal.
Oh, good.
So in this crowd outside, as Wise and Neil and these other guards are left to watch the waterworks, they've taken these 2 prisoners, and outside there's this big mob of people that are all really angry. And among this mob are 4 unarmed veterans. And so the veterans approach the waterworks, and it makes Windy and Neil a little antsy.
Feeling a little outnumbered.
Yeah, so they're sitting there looking out the window at this crowd with these 4 veterans standing in the front of it, and in a feat of amazingness, Ed and Charles dove through a window, escaping into the safety of the crowd.
Almost as if they dealt with worse people than these deputies before.
Right? So when Wise sees them dive through the window, he steps out and starts menacing the crowd with his pistol, and the veterans in the crowd, unarmed, tried to bum rush him. But they were stopped. They were pulled back to safety by the crowd, who didn't want them to get shot. So then they turn around and say, let's go get our guns, and they turn and they leave and go to S&K, which is where their campaign manager's office is at. So shortly afterwards, Chief Deputy Bo Dunn arrives to take the ballot box. When Wise told him about what had happened with the GIs, he orders 2 men to go down to GI headquarters to arrest the GIs there.
Oh.
Yeah, no, to arrest them. Oh. He's sending them to arrest them. He then took the rest of the men with him back to the jail. So he sends 2 to go arrest the GIs, takes 4 to the jail. Not to jail, but to the jail.
Yeah.
To count the ballots illegally.
Right. Other deputies back to jail.
Shockingly, when the 2 deputies arrived to arrest the GIs, they were disarmed and taken hostage.
Oh, they didn't give them cookies?
No, they didn't give them cookies. They took them hostage.
Oh.
And as a crowd gathered outside of the GI headquarters, 3 more deputies were sent and arrived, weapons drawn, to arrest the disobedient GIs.
Cavalry.
Yes, the cavalry has arrived, and they were quickly disarmed, beaten, and taken hostage.
Oh, that didn't work.
Yeah. Oh. And I saw a couple of conflicting things here. So one of the things I read said that it was just the 2 and the 3, and then another one said that there were 2 more that showed up in the crowd that were also beaten and taken hostage for a total of 7 hostages.
So somewhere in the neighborhood of at least 2.
Yes. So at this point, the crowd and even some of the veterans are calling for blood, and they want to just kill these deputies. And Otto, at this point, is like, I'm not really comfortable with this, so he bails and just leaves him. He's like, I'm not going to be a part of this, and walks out. The veterans eventually get it under control. They say, no, we're not going to do that. Not going to just kill these guys. So instead, they drag all 7 of the hostages out to the woods about 10 miles outside of town, beat them senseless, and then shackle them to the trees. And I assume they probably smear them with honey and tell them to be careful of the bears as they, heavyweight style, just leave them in the woods.
Smear them with honey.
There are no bears in these woods.
There's no bears
here. Help me! You kind child, please help me. So around this time, about 3:45, across from the jail at the Dixie Cafe, which had been established as the 12th precinct polling place, Minnis Wilburn, who you will remember is the deputy that deputized the guy that shot the sailor earlier.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Anyway, so Minnis Wilburn gets in an altercation and arrests 2 GIs, Bob Harrell and Leslie Dooley, after they tried to intervene when, get this, he allowed an underage woman that was not on the voter registration and had no poll tax receipt.
So what you're saying is the GIs didn't want the women to vote.
No. No, they didn't want the unregistered and uneligible people to vote.
Who is
Because
she was a woman.
She was, but the woman doesn't disqualify her. It was the fact that she was too young and not on the voter registration and didn't have a poll tax receipt. So, just to clarify, for those of you that don't know, a poll tax is a tax as a fixed sum on every liable individual. So, in other words, it's the government saying, pay me for allowing you to live, peasant.
Papers, please.
And it was required by Tennessee at the time to cast a vote. Papers, please.
Papers, please.
Papers, please.
I mean, on one hand, you know the person is allowed to vote because they have that. On the other hand, it's wrong.
Yes, indeed. So, as Wilburn takes the ballot and reaches to deposit it, Harold grabbed his wrist, and Wilburn slapped him across the head with a blackjack, and then kicked him in the face as he fell to the floor.
Blackjack, billy club, nightstick, whatever you want to call it.
And then he closed the precinct, ordered Hornsby Alley blocked at both ends, and with a procession of guards, crossed the lawn to the jail with the ballot box and the GIs as captives.
They have more captives. Nice.
Yeah. So by 6 o'clock that night, it seemed like this was pretty much over. The GI headquarters was deserted. An unhappy crowd moved quietly along the streets. Another election had been stolen, and nothing could be done.
Wait, this is supposed to be a happy ending.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it ends. They stole the election, but there's another page here. Oh wait, hold on.
Oh my goodness!
I got this. Actually, there's another 3 pages here.
We got ahead of ourselves.
We got a little ahead of ourselves. So, but as DeRose puts it at this time, he says a line had been crossed. For nearly 10 years, the deputies had done whatever they wanted to whomever they wanted. What had been the consequence? People complained. They wrote letters. A handful of henchmen had some small legal difficulties. Only one had seen the inside of a jail. Now 7 deputies had been roughed up and robbed and were being held prisoner. More justice had been meted out in those frantic minutes than in the previous 10 years. Bill and the other GIs treated the deputies to a drive along the country roads of McMinn. They marched the captives into the woods, made them take off their clothes, and tied them to the trees. Some got whipped with a hickory stick. The GIs headed back to town, leaving the deputies behind. Back in town, the GIs were adrift, unsure of what their next course of action should be. But Bill White, once again,
shining armor,
steps forward and rallies the troops. And this is what he said to them. Well, here you are. After 3 or 4 years of fighting for your country, you survived it all. You came back. What did you come back to? A free country? You come back to Athens, Tennessee in McMinn County that's run by a bunch of outlaws. They've got hired gunmen all over this county right now at this minute. What for? One purpose. To scare you so bad you won't dare stand up for the rights you've been bleeding and dying for. Some of your mothers and some of your sisters are afraid to walk down the streets to the polling places. Lots of men, too, because they know what happens. A car drives by in the night and shoots out your windows. If that doesn't scare you enough, they'll set fire to your house and your barn. They'll beat up members of your family and put them in jail for no reason. Is that the kind of freedom you were supposed to be fighting for? Do you know what your rights are supposed to be? How many rights have you got left? None. Not even the right to vote in a free election. When you lose that, you've lost everything. And you are damned well going to lose it unless you fight, and fight the only way they understand. Fire with fire. We've got to make this an honest election because we promised the people that if they voted, it would be an honest election. And it's going to be. But only if we see that it is. We're going to have to run these organized criminals out of town, and we can do it if we stick together. Are you afraid of them? Why? I could take a banana stalk and run every one of these pot-bellied draft dodgers across Depot Hill. Get the hell out of here and get something to shoot with. Come back as fast as you can.
That gives me goosebumps.
I know, right?
Whew.
Whew. So,
Where's the fight? Where's the fight?
as he finishes this speech, the members of his militia and the other GIs gathered around disperse to go find themselves some weapons, and White decides he's going to go get himself some guns. So he sends 2 GIs to go get a truck with a few of the other veterans, maybe a dozen or so. He heads over to the National Guard Armory.
I know where the guns are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he knows where the guns are. So in a 1969 interview, he actually describes this. He says he broke down the armory doors and took all the rifles, 2 Thompson submachine guns, and all the ammunition we could carry, loaded it up in the 2-ton truck, and went back to GI headquarters and passed out 70 high-powered rifles and 2 bandoliers of ammunition with each one. Oh, be still my heart.
That's a lot of hot sixes.
That's a lot of hot 6. 2 bandoliers per gun? 70 guns? Whew. Whew. So by 9 p.m., Paul Cantrell, Pat Mansfield, State Representative George Woods, who was also a member of the Election Commission, and about 50 deputies were locked inside the jail and going through the ballot boxes. Illegally, I might add. The presence of Mansfield and Woods meant that a majority of the Election Commission was on hand.
How convenient.
So the tallies could be certified and validated on the spot, though technically they're supposed to be counted by a third party.
That is so
More
convenient.
deputies were still barricaded in the courthouse, but along the streets, none were to be seen. If the Contral forces had been a bit more wary, they might have spotted some shadows slipping up the embankment directly across the street from the jail.
If they didn't trust their rigged polling, they would have known that a
But
different
they
person...
did not notice these things happening. So, as this kind of carries on, the GIs set themselves up, and it's really important to kind of know some of the motivation behind this. So, DeRose noted that White had joined the Marines just steps away at the old post office, which was between him and the jail. And he says he had sworn to defend America against all her enemies, and he meant to satisfy his vow. Later, White would explain that if it was worth going over there and risking your life laying it down, it was worth it here too. So we decided to fight. So the GIs set out, ready for action. They formed a line on a hillside across from the jail and demanded that the machine men bring out the ballot boxes. From the jail, someone called, "You're going to have to come get them." So the GIs answered that's exactly what they would do. Someone inside the jail shouted, "Why don't you call the law?" And one of the GIs retorted, "There ain't no damn law in McMinn County."
Oof.
So this is where opinions kind of differ as to exactly how this went down. But White says that he was the one to call it out. He said, "Would you damn bastards bring these damn ballot boxes out here, or we are going to set siege against the jail and blow it down." Moments later, the night exploded in automatic weapons, fire punctuated by shotgun blasts. And White claims that he fired the first shot.
The shot heard around McMinn County.
Other sources claim that it was a shotgun blast from inside the jail that actually set everything off. But White still says he shot first.
Of course
and
he did. He's a
then
Marine.
everybody started shooting. So a deputy runs for the jail, and White says, "I shot him." He wheeled and fell inside of the jail. Bullets ricocheted up and down White Street. "I shot a second man. His leg flew out from under him. He crawled under a car."
Jeez.
So this continues on for hours. The jail bombarded by the veterans, and Contral and his men trying to return fire, but the veterans had the high ground, so it's one of those
And
Anakin versus Obi-Wan things.
Yeah. And they had ammo.
Oh, yeah, there's that.
Lots
They
of
had
ammo.
lots of ammo. So Contral and his accomplices, secure behind the red brick walls, refused to surrender. In the streets, the veterans further hemmed in the crossfire, firing from behind walls and parked cars. The soldiers shot out the transformer that supplied the jail.
No power for you.
Leaving the deputies not only low on ammo, but with the difficult task of groping each other around trying to load guns in the dark.
Groping each other. I don't think that's what they did.
Wait. Anyway, meanwhile, a group of Monroe and Polk County deputies, so two different counties here, the deputies from these two different counties, which were all part of
this machine,
of Crump's machine, tore through the town searching for Knox Henry, who was the GI candidate, planning to murder him.
Oh.
Thereby ensuring that Contral would win. Because if your candidate is dead, you can't win.
Yeah. Don't have to stuff the ballot boxes.
Don't have to stuff the ballot boxes if we just kill your candidate. So this carries on for a while, and as the battle drags past midnight, the GIs begin to have some uneasy second thoughts. See, they knew they had violated local, state, and federal laws, and if Contral wasn't routed before his rescuers arrived, they might spend the rest of their lives in prison. So as this is going on, rumors start flying around. National Guard is on the way. The state troopers are here. Birch Biggs and his gang are coming. Biggs was the one that ran Polk County. He was even worse than Contral was.
You thought Contral was bad.
Seriously. So the veterans are eager to end the battle. And some of them made Molotov cocktails, tried to light the place on fire. Eventually, they just went to the county supply house and got some dynamite. So the Molotov cocktails,
if the explosives don't work, get the real ones.
Right? So they're throwing Molotov cocktails and stuff, and it's not working at all. So around 2:30 in the morning, the dynamite finally arrives. But about this time, an ambulance pulls up around the north side of the jail. So the veterans and even the men in the jail stop shooting for a bit. It's like, oh, there's an ambulance. They're here to get wounded men. We'll just let it go for a second. Right?
Yeah. It's nice.
This sounds this rules of engagement. You got to be polite when people are removing wounded. It's fine.
Yeah.
Right?
And everyone always plays by the rules.
But as the ambulance pulls up, two men run out of the jail and jump in, and the ambulance takes off, speeding north out of town.
But the hospital's the other way.
Yeah. Hospital was the other way.
Oh.
It wasn't wounded people that jumped in. Obviously, because if you're wounded, I assume that you're not running and jumping into an ambulance and then speeding out of town. It was actually Paul Contral and Pat Mansfield who abandoned their men in the jail and just ran.
Like a good captain of their ship, they bailed.
Like a good captain, get out of here.
Exactly.
So at 2:48, the first stick of dynamite was tossed toward the jail, and it landed under Bo Dunn's cruiser.
Good.
So the explosion flips the vehicle over on its top, leaving its wheels spinning. And three more bundles of dynamite are thrown almost at the same time. One landed on the jail porch roof, another under Mansfield's car, and the third hit the jail wall and then just dropped. And so the explosions rattled windows throughout town, leaves falling from trees, debris scattering for blocks, and the jailhouse porch decided to jump off of its foundation.
I mean, they're throwing dynamite.
yeah, it's a little over the top.
I know these guys were trained to throw frag grenades, but gee.
So it's at this point that the deputies barricaded in the courthouse a block away decide to surrender.
Not even involved in this.
They're like,
see what you're doing
down
there.
the road, and they're like, I'm done. I'm out. I give up.
Clearly, you have us outgunned.
I gives up. I gives up. And also, the jail's defenders staggered out of their ruined stronghold and handed the ballot boxes over to the veterans. So, with the Contral forces conquered, 10 years of suppressed rage exploded. The townspeople, in a vicious mob, just set on the deputies. And they would have killed all of them, but the veterans intervened and were like, no, hey, sit, no, bad. Unfortunately, they weren't quite quick enough. They did not manage to save Minnis Wilburn, who had his throat slit.
I mean...
and a couple of them were beaten senseless. One of them got shot in the jaw. You know, a couple little things like that.
Windy Wise was
kicked and beaten senseless.
Good.
He deserved it. So the GIs cleared the jail of the rioters, locked up their prisoners for the night. And it's pretty much the end of it. It goes to show that you can make a difference if you really feel like fighting for it. But there's the aftermath.
The aftermath.
So August 11th, so this is 10 days later, 5 GIs were elected to office in McMinn County, and they announced that they would return to the county all fees in excess of $5,000. Elsewhere in Tennessee, E.H. Crump and his machine were finally on the way out, with the election of Governor Gordon Browning and a young United States Senator by the name of Estes Kefauver. It's Kefauver. Kefauver. Estes Kefauver.
Yes.
For a full year afterward, the national press seized upon the most insignificant news from Athens as evidence of the veterans' lawlessness. There was, indeed, remarkably little criminal prosecution in the wake of that violent night. Only one man had charges brought against him. Do you know who?
It had to be one of the veterans because.
No. It was Windy Wise, the guy that shot the old black farmer Tom Gillespie.
Good.
Yeah, he drew a sentence of 1 to 3 years.
Not enough.
Not enough.
Of course.
Though I assume Gillespie actually survived. I haven't seen anything that said that he died from those wounds. So, attempted murder. Still think it deserves more than that.
Yeah.
But as for the larger results of the Athens Rebellion, the GIs universally hailed the return of the independent vote to the community and the election of fine people to lead it. The national press continued to show interest in what had happened. The best, if incomplete, account of it at the time was a Harper's article by Theodore White, if you want to look that up.
Okay.
Paul Cantrell, after seeking temporary asylum in Chattanooga, returned to Etowah and continued to operate the bank there with his brothers. They are all dead now, as is Jim Buttram. Otto Kennedy still lives in Athens, at least as of the writing of the thing that I got most of my information from, which was several years ago, so not sure if he's still around. But Pat Mansfield returned secretly to Athens on August 8th, 1946, to resign his membership on the election commission. He met with Otto Kennedy for 2 hours, apparently with no ill feeling on either side, and then announced, "I'm through with politics for good. It'll sure mess you up sometimes. I'm going back to railroading."
Yeah, because that wasn't corrupt.
Right. As for the man behind the curtain, Boss Crump made the cover of Time magazine in 1946 and was described
Good for him.
as the most absolute political boss in the United States. In 1947, Boss Crump did not allow the Freedom Train to stop in Memphis.
Oh.
And you know what the Freedom Train is?
Train full of freedom.
It was a train full of freedom.
Naturally.
Actually, it really was a train full of freedom, because it was the train that was sent across the country with the original copies of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
was a mobile museum, basically.
Basically, yeah. So
Traveling museum. There you go.
he didn't allow it to stop in Memphis because he didn't want integrated crowds to view its precious original copies of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. At this point, the joke was no longer funny.
Yeah.
The racism of this decision was likened to the policies of Hitler by some black preachers, and progressive Memphians were finally ready for a change. Although he was still influential in Memphis politics until his death in 1954, Crump lost a lot of his power in around this time, and then even more in 1948 when he opposed the election of Harry Truman as president. And for another racist reason, he had supported the States' Rights Party, who were opposed to Truman's civil rights laws, which would have abolished the poll tax and increased penalties against lynching.
Oh.
Yeah. So this was the man who ran the Democratic Party in the South between 1910 and 1954. So there you go.
Oh.
So his coalition after this totally fell apart because the African Americans left him. He was not able to put the coalition back together at all before he died. He died on October 16th, 1954, was buried in Memphis Elmwood Cemetery. He had his headstone installed before his death, and there's a legend that says he would bring a picnic blanket and eat lunch admiring his headstone.
I believe it.
I believe it too.
How self-absorbed he is with power.
Right? So, and that was the funny thing is he really was completely absorbed with the power to the point where before he died, he actually discarded some of his political machine and some of the different practices that he started doing because he knew that clever politicians will ultimately give the people the government that they want. And all he wanted was power, not money. So with the power he never needed to steal a single cent. I mean, he'd steal an election, but he wouldn't steal a nickel.
Oh, at least he's an honorable thief, I guess. Not really, no.
No, not really. None. But, I mean, arguably, he did have a sincere love for Memphis and for the people of Memphis, if they agreed with him.
If they agreed with him.
I mean, under him, they got corruption and violence and, all those awful things. They also got an efficient government service, law and order, some lower taxes, and a clean, quiet, and beautiful city in Memphis.
Memphis, where he lived.
So, real question is, was the trade-off worth it?
Huh. Yeah, that's it. That's Battle of Athens.
Yeah, pretty much.
From before the beginning to a little bit after the end, with the man behind it all. Really cool story, and I think everyone should know at least the gist of it, because especially right now, like I mentioned earlier, historically, this is some crazy times we're in, where they're talking about election this, fraud that, vote this, mail in that. And this story has all of that already happening. History does not repeat itself, it rhymes. And that's why we like...
I would say it not only repeats itself, it also rhymes.
It's like a book.
It is indeed. Just like that one.
Amo, you magnificent bastard, I read your book!
Just like that.
Just like that one.
Yeah, everything you see, Democrat or Republican, whatever, they all use the same playbook.
Pretty much.
There are the good within each side of political spectrumness, but there's also people like Boss Crump that ruin everything for everyone.
And if you don't pay attention to history, if you don't learn from the things that have gone before, then it'll just keep happening.
It'll keep on happening.
So, this has been a slice of history for you, my friends.
And until the next slice,
We'll catch you later.
bye.